Most people think buying or selling is all about interest rates, but the season you're moving in can change your options, your competition, and how much room you have to negotiate. In this video, I'm breaking down the best times to buy and sell in the Portland, Maine area. After 6 years in the market and hundreds of homes sold, I'll show you when to make your move and when it's worth waiting. First, here's a quick update on where the Portland market sits right now, because it sets up everything else we're talking about today. A year or two ago, the timing of your move didn't have the same impact it does today. If a good house hit the market, buyers showed up, and it sold. There weren't as many options out there, so people moved quickly when something good came available. But that's changed a bit this year. Spring picked up after a slower start, and inventory has been building since March. Buyers have more options today than they've had in a long time, so they're not chasing every listing that comes up the way they were a few years ago. Homes are also taking longer to sell than they did during the frenzy years ago. Besides, a big portion of listings across have already taken a price cut, and more than half of the homes are selling below asking price. A few years ago, buyers were competing to beat the list price, but today they're much more willing to wait, to negotiate, and move on if the numbers don't make sense. With a median home price in the mid 500s to low 600s, buyers are a lot more careful about what they're willing to buy. Now, more inventory doesn't mean good inventory. There are a lot more homes on the market, but some of the inventory isn't what buyers are looking for. Homes that are priced right and show well are still moving, while the homes that sit are often priced too high, need work, or both. So sellers have a little bit more competition today, and buyers have more room to be selective. That's a pretty different dynamic than what we had in 2021, where almost everything sold right away. What we're seeing now is a market that's behaving much more like a normal seasonal market again. And when the market gets more seasonal, the month you buy or sell in can make a bigger difference than it did a few years ago. At the same time, this market creates a different set of options and opportunities and risks for sellers. In a minute, we'll break down everything sellers need to do. But let's look at how this calendar works for buyers first. Now, if you're trying to figure out whether it's the right time to buy, the right time to sell, or you're stuck trying to do both at the same time, reach out. I can help you put together a strategy based on what's happening in the market. My contact info is down below. All right, let's keep going. Let's look at how this calendar works for buyers first. Most of them are looking in the spring, when the weather gets better and more homes are on the market. It seems like the right time to jump in. The problem is you're competing with a lot of buyers who have the same exact idea. Spring is usually when buyer demand is at its highest in Portland. More listings come to market, but more buyers show up too. That's why there tends to be a lot more competition, and it's also why sellers have more leverage. Buyers end up making faster decisions, paying more, sometimes agreeing to the terms they probably wouldn't accept at other times of the year too. Families are also trying to move before the next school year starts. That's something that adds even more competition. They're working against a deadline, so sellers know they don't have to give up much in negotiations because another buyer may be right behind them. As summer moves along, some of the urgency starts to fade. People go on vacation, families who needed to move before school have already done it. Inventory often stays fairly high, but there are fewer buyers competing for the same homes. That's where buyers can start getting more room to negotiate, especially on homes that didn't sell during the spring rush. A seller who listed in the spring and didn't get the price they wanted may be looking at things differently by the fall. Their home has been sitting longer, there may have already been a price reduction, and they're often more willing to talk credits, repairs, or closing dates because they want to get the home sold. But the hardest situation isn't buying or selling, it's trying to do both at the same time, and we'll talk about that next. Now, the trade-off is pretty straightforward. Spring gives you more options, but it usually costs negotiating power because you're competing with more buyers. So if you're looking for a very specific neighborhood, school district, or type of home, spring may still be a better fit. On the other hand, fall gives you fewer options, but often a lot more leverage because there are fewer buyers competing for the same homes. If you have some flexibility, you're not in a rush, and you're looking for more room to negotiate, waiting can actually be in your favor. But for sellers, the same calendar looks completely different because the months buyers struggle the most are often the months sellers prefer. If you're thinking about selling, the strongest stretch of this year is usually April through June. That's when buyer activity is high and there still aren't enough listings to give buyers a ton of choices. If your home is priced right and it shows well during that window, it has a much better chance of standing out. The challenge is that it doesn't last all year. As summer goes on, more homes keep coming onto the market. Buyer demand can still be strong, but there are more listings competing for attention. That's where the advantage starts to shrink because your home isn't standing out the way it would have earlier in the spring. A lot of sellers wait until the summer to list. The problem is they're entering into the market at the same time as the other homeowners who had this exact same idea. So instead of competing against a shortage of listings, you're competing against a growing number of sellers. But that doesn't mean you've missed your chance if you're listing later in the year. Homes still sell in every season in Maine because inventory remains fairly tight overall, but the calendar isn't giving you the same boost anymore. So pricing and presentation have to do more of the work. If the price is too aggressive, buyers have enough options that they'll move on or wait for something better. That's the trade-off sellers need to understand. Spring gives you the strongest combination of buyer demand and limited competition. Later in the year, you can still get a great result, but you have to be more careful about pricing and how the home's presented. But if you need to sell your current home before you can buy the next one, this is where things get tricky. The hardest move in real estate is selling one home and buying another at the same time, because timing that helps you as a seller usually isn't the same timing that helps you as a buyer. One thing I'd definitely bring up with your lender is whether there's a way to buy before your current home sells. Most people never even ask that question, and that's where they can miss options that would have made a move a whole lot easier. A lot of people assume a contingent offer is their only option, and sometimes it is, but there are other tools out there too. Maybe it's a bridge loan, maybe it's borrowing against the equity in your current home. Some people even use a mortgage recast after they sell. Every situation is different, but I'd want to know what those options look like before I assume I have to buy and sell the traditional way. That can make a big difference because a non-contingent offer is much stronger in a competitive market. There are still sellers in this market who wouldn't even consider a contingent offer if they have another option on the table. If a seller's looking at multiple offers, they're going to prefer the one that doesn't depend on the sale of another closing first. Now, contingent offers can still work. I had a listing that accepted one last week. If a home has been sitting for a while, or maybe there weren't many other good offers on the table, a seller may be willing to work with those different terms. Every property is different. For the listing I had, it was a great offer. It was the only showing we had, and the deal made sense. If you can line up that kind of financing, though, you don't have to force both transactions into the same window. You can sell during the stronger spring market, and then look for your next home later in the year when buyers often have more negotiating room. But if financing isn't available, you better go with realistic expectations. You're probably not going to get the perfect selling window and the perfect buying window at the same time. At that point, I'd stop worrying about getting it perfect on both sides because that's probably not going to happen. I'd focus on putting myself in the strongest position on the purchase instead. That means waiting a little longer to buy and targeting a slower part of the year. That's probably the path I'd take. I'd rather have more negotiating room on the purchase than force everything into the same timeline. The biggest mistake people make here is assuming that they only have one path forward. Before you start touring homes or getting your house ready for the list, figure out what financing options are available to you first. But no matter which path you take, there's one thing that ends up being more important than the calendar itself. The seasonal windows we've talked about are real, and if you have the flexibility to choose timing, I'd use them. Sellers tend to have the advantage during the spring market, while buyers often have more room to negotiate later in the year. But timing only gets you so far. A home that's priced correctly and presented well can sell in February, and an overpriced home can still sit in June because buyers just move on. The calendar can help you, but it isn't going to solve a pricing problem. That's why I'd focus on price and presentation first. Then, if you have the opportunity to line your timing up with those seasonal windows, that's where you can pick up an extra advantage. Knowing when to buy or sell helps. Pair that with the right price, good presentation, and a solid strategy, and that's where you'll probably get the best results. If you're trying to figure out when to buy, when to sell, or how to handle both at the same time, send me an email today. We can look at your situation, your timing, your goals, and then put together a plan that makes sense for where the market is right now. If you're planning a move and trying to figure out where demand is strongest, watch this next video. I break down Portland neighborhoods and show you where homes are moving fast and where they're taking longer to sell. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.